My friends, the Belgorod incursion continues. In the previous video, we covered how the Russian Volunteer Corps went into Russia for the third time, and the settlement in question and under attack at that time was Shebekino. Now Shebekino is also under attack, but we have another settlement. This time it's Novaya Davolzhanka, right here. Yesterday, Russians shelled this village, their own village. Of course they did. This is a village, or town, in Russian sense it's a village. This is the longest raid into Belgorod area because it goes on already 3+ days. So about that I see units, Russian Volunteer Corps, they're getting trophies. In this video we can see them getting yet another BTR. The Kharkiv offensive of the Ukrainians was one of the only battles in the world where the attacking side went in with less armor than they came out with. Ukrainians got over 200 working infantry fighting vehicles and tanks from Izium that were integrated into the armed forces of Ukraine successfully. It was a very successful offensive. Now this Belgorod incursion might be the next one, because we keep seeing videos of Volunteer Corps getting trophies. If they go back to Ukraine, they will have more armor than they went into Russia with. And we can make this meme that Russia is the #1 sponsor of Russian Volunteer Corps. In this video I'll be covering what has been happening for the last 2 days with this raid to Belgorod. What's the goal of it? What's the long-term plan of it? Who is winning? One of the reasons they definitely went into Belgorod area were a Russian S-300 and S-400 anti-air systems. Why? Because Russia has been shelling Kharkiv, the second biggest city of Ukraine, non-stop for the last year with S-300 and S-400 from Russian soil. Their range is pretty big, Russia has a lot of those missiles left, and the sad part is that no Western anti-air defense can shoot down an S-300 or S-400 missiles. They're simply too fast for it. We have not seen any successful shoot down of those missiles yet. No antidote for it. The only antidote that works is to destroy the launchers. Ukraine has been trying to do that by flying drones into Belgorod Oblast for a year. They have been trying to shell back. But these missile systems are very mobile. They can shoot and move away, much like HIMARS. Unfortunately, they're not very precise, but they do a lot of damage to Kharkiv because it's a big city. Wherever you hit something. Of course, the Svoboda Rossiya enters in the vicinity of Kharkiv into Belgorod region, and I think one of their main goals is to destroy these launching systems because they have the power right now to liberate Kharkiv from the missile barrage. I think they're doing that. One of the official goals of this incursion. There's many more. Let's talk about the information sphere, and it is out of control for Russia. It has evolved into a tidal wave of a failure, colossal failure for Russia. In the last video I mentioned how Russia was trying to suppress the incursion into Belgorod region. In Russian social media, if you tried to write the settlement name of Shebekino, where most of the battles happened, it changed the name to some other settlement so Russians couldn't search it and they wouldn't know what's happening. Well, this failed. The incursion has become known in Russia state-wise. Everybody has heard about it because Russian military bloggers are talking about it. Igor Kirkin is talking about it. Prigozhin is talking about it. And people from Shebekino and other settlements who are fleeing are making videos and posting them online. Russia has totally failed to suppress this information. And adding to that, insurgents hacked into local Belgorod area radios and broadcasted that there will be a referendum on Sunday, today, for support of the Belgorod People's Republic. This has sent the local population into total state of panic. And adding to that, the Svoboda Rossiya unit fighters have been spreading information online that they will start evacuating local Russian populations into Ukraine. Sounds familiar? Well, it does sound familiar from 2014. They're using the exact Russian playbook of doing this. And this is why Russians are so offended about this. 2014, what happened? Russian fighters, insurgents and separatists went into Donbass, made people's republics out of those Luhansk and Donbass, and started evacuating Ukrainian people from those areas into Russia. Now Ukraine is doing the same in Belgorod. It's a slap in Russia's face, using their own playbook, using their own weapon against them. And I always remember the meme from Harry Potter, where Snape says, "You dare use my own spell against me, Potter?" Of course, Ukrainians are not going to evacuate or deport Russian people into Ukraine. There's no point in doing that. They don't gain anything from it. But it destabilizes the Russian hold on media and information. They're making Russia react in any way. You can see what they're doing. Claiming things left and right, and Russia would have to react to those claims. Outlandish claims. Claims like, we're gonna take Moscow and Novosibirsk. Russia has to react to those. How do the local Russians feel about the Ukrainian incursion? Let's watch a video. This is a girl from Shebekino, the main settlement. Most of the battles have been happening around. Russia has been shelling this city. Let's see what she thinks. I'll be reading you the subtitles at the same time the video is playing, so we get to make a shorter video for you. Good day, let's talk about the situation in the town of Shebekino. I'm 18 years old and I study in the local college, but because of constant shelling, studying is impossible. My family doesn't have enough money or opportunities to evacuate outside of the city. I've found myself under shelling more than once. More than once I've seen people run out of their houses literally in their underwear. I don't want to sound mean or out of place here, but this is a Russian girl living a few kilometers from Ukraine where people are dying every day, and she's complaining about not being able to study because of shelling. Well, this is the Ukrainian reality for almost 2 years soon. These are pseudo problems. Russians need to see this war, need to see what they're doing to Ukraine. Now it's becoming to their doorstep. So for me, this, I say good, they're finally becoming to understand. And ran the shelters, basements are just simply ducked and covered. I saw mothers shield their kids with their bodies. I saw fear and panic in people's eyes. Of course, I'm not propagating that you should attack Russian people, but I am also saying that Russian people have the collective responsibility for atrocities committed by the Russian army, because Russian people together are responsible for a Russian country, state and their actions. So in this way, hearing this girl about her problems, you can see where my thoughts are coming from. Her not being able to see the war in Ukraine is part of the problem in Russia. It's horrible to realize that 7-year-old kids know about Solnstepok and Grad rocket systems. Our nerves are fraying, women are crying, particularly every time I want to live normally like other cities in Russia. Well, you cannot live normally if your state is committing war crimes in the neighboring country. This girl is on the journey to wake up and see what her country is doing. So I don't think she deserves to live normally until they change the leadership and they change the mindset in Russia. No normal life for the Russians, because they are responsible collectively. Shebekino is part of the Russian Federation and we are asking for help. We don't know who will protect us. Why do we have to use our own resources to evacuate our city, to leave the land of which we were born? Please move the front line farther away and save Belgorod Oblast, the town of Shebekino. She's asking to please move the front line farther away so we could study again in peace and our people could be in peace. Move it to Ukraine. That's what I'm hearing. Move it to Ukraine. Fight in Ukraine. Kill the Ukrainians so we can study in peace. If you hear like this, the Russian people thinking like this, I think you will understand my mindset that they are the problem. They have the collective responsibility, the mindset of we're a big empire, fight somewhere on the borderlands, not in our country, then I'll be fine. This is the mindset to be blamed. In this video you can see what happens if the Russian police and local authorities pull out of the Shebekino city. Immediately marauding and looting is happening. These are Russian people, local people, looting Russian stores. The only thing keeping order there was the local police, and they're gone now, so everything is stolen, windows smashed in. Well, as I have said before, Russian culture is a culture of theft, unfortunately. The Polish Volunteer Corps, yes, I said the Polish Volunteer Corps, has published photos of them being part of the very first incursion into Belgorod. So they took part with the Russian Volunteer Corps. So the Polish fighters were in Russia already, fighting in Russia, and the first incursion happened with Western weaponry and Western vehicles like Humvees. So we had Polish fighters with American Humvees fighting in Russia. This gives Russian propaganda and media a possibility to spin that NATO is attacking them, and their Russian people have been have been brainwashed to immediately swallow this news, and this will mobilize them against Ukraine. So it's really bad to give Russian media anything to grab onto. Here we can see a Polish volunteer corps soldier taking a picture with a Russian volunteer corps soldier. So it is confirmed. Polish fighters were on Russian soil. In this video I saw Russians using incendiary munitions on their own settlement of Shebekino. A city of 40,000 people in Russia, and Russians are burning into the ground immediately. Not a second of doubt. Immediately if Ukrainians start to occupy any buildings, there's incendiary munitions. This shows the Russian military attitude towards their own cities and people. They don't care. And unfortunately, their media spins this the opposite way, 180 degrees, that Ukrainians are shelling this city with incendiary munitions. So they're doing it and they're mobilizing the people against Ukraine at the same time. That's the sad part of this. If anyone would think, oh, now the Russians see what their army is like, they don't. Their media spins everything the opposite way, so they see that the Ukrainians did it, unfortunately. Igor Kirkin has said his comments about the raid of Belgorod, and let's watch what he thinks about it. Is Belgorod really defendable, and what's the goal of this incursion? If the enemy actually decided to conduct a large-scale offensive towards Belgorod, then I'm forced to disappoint those who believe that we've got everything great and perfect. I don't know, I doubt they would take Belgorod on the fly. Well, here he is right, I have to comment, because Belgorod, saying it as the Ukrainians I think, is a big city. And majority of people are Russian-minded. Of course, there is a minority of Ukrainian-minded people in that city. But you don't take that city with 500 or even 1,000 fighters. To take that city, you would need much, much more. So if me, myself, or any other viewers are hoping that the Russian volunteer corps would be storming Belgorod or taking it or surrounding it, this is unfortunately not possible due to the size of the city. I mean, the local police force alone could defend it for some time. Also, I don't think it would be the goal. I think one of the goals of the Russian volunteer corps entering that area would be to encourage the Ukrainian minority in Belgorod to take matters into their own hands, perhaps take the city government and the police buildings, start a weaponized incursion against the Russians, like to wake up the Ukrainians in the city, because the volunteer corps is coming, they're coming to relieve and help us. This might happen. It hasn't happened yet, but it might. And it might be one of the goals. But reaching its outskirts, considering the sloppiness demonstrated at Graivoron, Graivoron was a Russian border point that really they gave up. The Russians just ran away when the Ukrainians approached. In case the enemy deployed not one battalion, but at least a few brigades, they could have done it easily, unfortunately. If they managed to advance 8 kilometers in the first hour and a half and didn't meet any organized resistance, then imagine if they advanced with forces 7 to 8 times larger, not one battalion, but with 9 battalions, for example. These are precisely distracting strikes. They're playing chicken with Kremlin. I do agree, unfortunately, I agree here with Kirkin. I mean, this incursion is not to occupy, I've said it many times. It's playing chicken. It's we strike here, boom, we strike here, we pull out, we strike here. Making Kremlin's forces have to react to every small incursion, move around their reserves, which are very slow and heavy to deploy. This exhausts the men, exhausts the resources, and exhausts the logistics, bottlenecks on the road, traffic jams. These incursions don't have to occupy any area long term to make huge problems for Russian logistics and reserves, forcing it to bring up additional resources to the locations of the attacks. To cover the old border of the Russian Federation with anything they have, even if the reserves are not moved, this still potentially weakens our forces ahead of their offensive. Why? Because we're deploying the exact reserves that could be diverted where the main strike will be dealt. Yeah, I've said it before. Anything of the Russian army taken away from Ukraine and diverted to Belgorod is a huge victory for the Ukrainians. They have to fight less Russians now. Here we see the Russian losses of the past 24 hours. 470 KIA, as we can see, and 8 tanks, 10 armored personnel vehicles, 22 artillery systems, and a lot of those come again from the incursion of Belgorod, because one of the goals, as I said, was destroying S-300, S-400s, but also destroying the artillery, because they were shelling Ukrainian border area villages with artillery. You know, this artillery had shorter range, and Ukrainians couldn't destroy them all with drones and counter-artillery, so Slava Russia definitely is picking any artillery pieces they can see. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems, again, this might come from the Belgorod region. Taking those S-300 and S-400 will save Kharkiv city from missile barrages, saving Ukrainian lives daily. 10 UAVs, 16 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 4 special equipment. These are incredibly high losses. If these numbers continue, Russia cannot produce those faster than they lose them. Some of these vehicles they cannot produce at all. And I've mentioned in the past videos, their missile producing capabilities are about 40 to 60 cruise missiles per month. And in May, just the statistics came out that they shot out 154 cruise missiles in May towards Ukraine, and they can only produce 40 to 60. That means their missile attacks will be sparse and rare in the future. Here we have a military map, and now I will zoom into a location that is very unexpected. This city here in Donetsk, Marinka. I'm sorry about the Kadyrovites, I couldn't change it. Marinka is in this city. The front line has been continued like this, around this vicinity for 10 years. 2014, these defensive lines were settled here, and they haven't moved since, because the defensive lines on both sides have been set, have been strong, manned, and they have been holding. But now, recently, Chechen units have been sent here, and they have made a very small gain around the Marinka Dam in this area. We haven't heard about the casualties yet, but if it's the Chechens who are advancing, I'm guessing the casualties are huge. And we're talking only about 100, 200 meters right now, and this is one of the only areas Russians have advanced at all right now, 200 meters. Along this 800-kilometer front. That's their capability right now. Ukrainians are not letting Russians rest in the rear. The port of Berdyansk, one of the most important ports in the occupied Ukraine, because it's big and it can host huge vessels, this port was hit with possibly Storm Shadow. Why? Why Storm Shadow? Because we saw Russian anti-air in the air. We saw it being active and traces of it, but the missile was not shot down. So it possibly was Storm Shadow. Plus the boom was so big, nothing else could have made such a big boom. And in this video, we can see the destruction. It was one of those port hangars, possibly filled with Russian tech, equipment, weaponry, ammunition, whatever was in there, it's now gone, blown to space. Every hit like that slows down the Russian logistics, and the men in the front get lesser ammunition thanks to those hits in the rear. So you can actually say that Storm Shadow penetrated deep into Russian rear and exploded there. Okay, I'll stop, I'm sorry. In these photos we can see rusty Russian T-80s pulled out of storage and being driven to the front line. They're rusty, they're probably kept outside. Russia doesn't even have enough hangars to keep all their tanks inside, because before the war we saw photos of how Russian tanks, endless fields of Russian tanks were kept just outside, rusting. Now, these definitely are not in the working condition. And we can see it visually. These need a lot of work, so possibly they will head to some kind of repair shop before they can start working. If they can start working at all. Maybe they will use them for spare parts for the tank that are already on the fronts. But bringing out these tanks sends us a message that Russia is lacking armor, because otherwise they would use new tanks and new modernized working weapon systems that they have. Well, they don't have them anymore, that's why they bring out these rusty relics. Ukrainian Defense Minister Alexei Reznikov met with Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu. Why is this important? Well, because China and Russia are supposedly allies, supposedly friends, partners. And the rule is that Russia is communicating with Ukraine, or if Russia is not communicating, China is not supposed to. But if China is directly communicating with Ukraine, cutting Russia as the middleman, that means China is seeing Ukraine as a country, seeing Ukraine as a communication partner. That diminishes Russian power and Russian influence in the information sphere. That meeting already validates Ukraine by China. Although they're pushing for the peace initiative that is only good for Russia, and that's another story, but the fact that they're meeting like that, face to face, is a huge bitch slap to Russia in the information sphere. Now I will share with you a very interesting video. I have seen Olaf Scholz, the German Chancellor, only as a very reserved, quiet man who thinks before he talks, thinks everything through, and is a little bit slow to react to everything that is happening. This video changes everything. He was making one of his speeches, slow and quiet speeches, where somebody in the crowd, probably a Russian paid aggravator, yelled warmonger to Scholz. The last thing he is a warmonger. If anything, he's too slow to react. But now I think Germans have unleashed the dragon. Let's watch it. And in this one I'm going to pause to read the subtitles because I want to hear his voice, because you will see why. Otherwise I'll read over it. This is German Chancellor Olaf Scholz reacting to somebody screaming warmonger to him. Warmonger, first of all, the warmonger is Putin. He invaded Ukraine with 200,000 soldiers. He's risking the life of his own citizens for imperialistic dream. Putin wants to destroy and conquer Ukraine, and he also has others in sight. That is something we, as friends of freedom, as Democrats, as Europeans, won't allow to happen. While you scream peace without weapons, Putin pulled together a massive amount of tanks, cruise missiles and rockets and aimed it at Ukraine. He's destroying cities, villages, highways and railways. And he killed countless citizens, children and elderly in Ukraine. This is murder, to say it very clear. In his imperialistic dream of might, he risks the lives of his own citizens. We don't know how many young Russian soldiers already died for his dream. I've never seen Scholz like it. I mean, he's destroying the image I have of him right now. I see him now as a very strong and powerful leader. He's grabbing the microphone like he wants to destroy it. I'm not sure if you want to wake up this guy. I mean, Germans are powerful people. If they have a goal and they work together for it, they're the most powerful nation in Europe. You don't want to wake this dragon. But it might be as many as 100,000 or 150,000 dead Russian soldiers. How can one waste the life of their own young people in that way? I gotta say, I agree with everything he says. He's like waking up something in me right now. All just because one Putin wants. This is irresponsible, that is warmongering, that is violence with weapons. Okay, this is officially the best speech I've ever heard Scholz say. I've heard many of his speeches, very sleepy, boring and without power. This, he should speak like that. Very adequate response to Russian aggravator screaming warmongerer. Well done. Style points and all kind of points go to Olaf Scholz right here. Now we will watch a clip from Russian propaganda. It's a short one, but I know you guys like it. In this one, it is unbelievable what the guy is saying. He's saying that we should bring back the punishment of the Soviet Union, enemy of the people paragraph, where the punishment of that was a shot to the back of the head. And he says we should bring back deportations to Siberia in Russian TV, and people are listening to him. It is insane. Russia is becoming a dystopia. Let's watch it. To avoid such manifestations of Russophobia in our country, there must be severe punishment, as it was during the time of the Soviet Union. The article of enemy of the people, so that 1 or even 5 times it should happen publicly to those who openly discredit, promote the wrong ideology in our country. He says it should happen publicly, maybe 5 times. So he says they should start shooting people publicly. This is a man talking to Russian people, millions of them, proposing to go back to that time. for others to see it and know it, and then there will be no such thing. When in the Soviet Union you were an enemy of the people, you could be shot or exiled to Siberia. Your relatives wouldn't get the benefits, the payment, and they would be despised by society, and then people would wonder whether it was worth opening their mouths at all. Public apologizing on camera, the remorse will lead nowhere. It will not help discipline them. This guy wants violence. He wants blood, we can see it, against their own people, because that's what the Soviet system did, against its own people. And they're calling for it. As I say, people like this, the Russian people have the collective responsibility for their country and their country's actions. Talking about propaganda, there's more, and there's some juicy ones. I mean, there's so much I cannot react to all of it, but I want to show the best bits. Here is some smooth brain propaganda for you. You're gonna laugh and get your popcorn. Russian Rehi Novosti published an article blaming Ukrainians of deploying militarized locusts, yeah, the bugs, locusts, to destroy crops in Donbass and Luhansk. So Ukraine has militarized locusts now, and people believe this. Russian pensioners on the street, if asked, they say, yeah, Ukraine have these pigeons who are trying to destroy our cities. They believe it, they eat it up, they don't even question it. We entered the fish farm territory, and right away we see the burnt surrounding fields in the direction of Stanitsia Luhanska. These young trees obviously are standing like this for several years. We came to this place to investigate because of this document we found in the Rubizhne Sanitary Control Station. It's an accompanying letter addressed to the 57th Brigade that was in 2019 stationed somewhere in Rubizhne area. It gets juicy, wait for it. It's a request to accompany 2 trucks delivering cargo to the territory of Luhansk Regional Fish Farm from Washington University in Missouri. Here we get juicy parts. Americans are involved. If you look in open source on the internet, you'll find out this lab, or rather this university, was working on developing warfare insects. Warfare insects fed to the Russian people, and they eat it up like it's breakfast cereal. They were the first ones to experiment with locusts. They originally experimented on using locusts for demining purposes. This type of migrating locust can be raised even at home for feeding other animals. Apparently, they chose this type because the conditions for breeding here are ideal and it can be done fast and easily. Here in particular are the locust's wings, showing some random locust on the ground. This indicates that these insects were here. So insects that were developed in Missouri, America, to be weaponized against Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics. This is why they have no food in those areas. Well, they need to blame somebody. It's something. The locusts. There is also a large number in garbage. It either burnt down or something happened to it. In July, this locust started flying. Since all of the larvae were of the same age, all the locusts was of the same size. It also points out that the artificial origin of these locusts. So because of they all, spring comes and locusts start to come to life. And since they all come to life together, they're from America. They're weaponized from America. Had this locust been a natural origin, insect would vary in size. According to our local Luhansk People's Republic's ecologists, well, maybe they should get better ecologists. I think the problem here is the Luhansk People's Republic's scientists or ecologists. Oh, this is pure humor here. There were clouds of locusts, thick clouds. It lasted several days, these locusts, and then disappeared. This is a local woman whose face has been blurred. Oh my god. I think the Russian propaganda has been given a free rein. Just go and make something up and they'll believe you anyway because they're zombified. Anyone seeing this from the West, your brain cells are there, you're not a smooth brain. You understand this is just a made-up fairy tale, but in Russia they eat it up. They live by it. They're ready to defend this knowledge and argue with you to the death. unfortunately very effective for Russian consuming. In these photos you can see Russian coping machine. If I recognize it correctly, it's supposed to be a Lada Samara, which was one of the latest Ladas before the end of the Soviet Union, covered with some kind of cages and metals. Well, this extra weight of metal put onto it, I'm telling you, Lada Samara's engine is weak as hell. It's weaker than my biceps. It's gonna die to that metal. Also, the cope is real, it's over 9,000. It's a looting machine. It's, you know, you cannot carry a washing machine with it, but you can fit one toilet in the back. Alright my friends, the time has come. Now I will go to Patreon, and oh, you guys really liked my butchering in the last video. Some of you became really big Patreons, and I want to really butcher those names. This is tier 100 and tier 250, and I'm gonna just make it impossible for you to listen. Tier 100, Robert Heatk. Thank you for becoming such a big patron, man. I really appreciate it. And now 250, I've had none of those at all. Thank you, man. Edwin S. Taylor. Thanks, man. And now tier 10 patrons. Niels Svensson. Scholz. Some Chinese characters. I have no... These are just lines for me. I don't know what to... I cannot butcher these if there's a lines. I'm gonna call you... Bob. Thank you, Bob. Jordan Vendiola. Thank you, I appreciate all of you guys. If you want me to butcher your names, Patreon links in the description below. Also, if you want compact and fast news about war in Ukraine, the most important news of the day, you'll get 3 times a day in my Twitter account. Links in the description below. Also go and check out my Instagram. I put there things you have never seen about me. I'm not meaning OnlyFans, I'm meaning like playing the accordion, shooting some guns, traveling, stuff like that. I cannot put on YouTube. And until my next video, my friends, Slava Ukraini.